Hi, welcome. My name is Anna. I have been coordinating this event. Thank you all for coming, both online and in person. We're very excited to have over 150 people joining us either in the Charles Perkins Centre or via the internet. Before we start, I just wanted to do an acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of this land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It is upon their ancestral lands that the University of Sydney is built. As we share our own knowledge, teaching, learning, and research practices within this university, may we also pay respect to the knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of country. Okay, so the purpose of this event is to bring together HDR students interested in the digital health space, so on the use of technology in healthcare. We've had such a huge response. We're confident that there is lots of interest in these topics, and we hope that in future there will be more events of interest to you all. The event is led by the Faculty of Health Sciences. It's an initiative of the eHealth and healthcare delivery research team, which is a special interest group looking at research around eHealth in health services. It's also a collaboration with the Digital Health and Informatics Network. We have the wonderful coordinator, Jack Wells, in the room with us today, and one of the co-chairs of the network, Tim Shaw, will be presenting. The Digital Health Informatics Network is a collaborative of researchers, clinicians, and other interested parties who want to know more about technology in the health sector. At the end of the event, there will be links about how you can join these networks. If you're interested, I strongly encourage you to get involved. Today, we have presentations from three wonderful presenters. We will first be hearing from Tim Shaw, who's the inaugural Professor of eHealth and Director of Research and Capacity Building at the Digital Health and Cooperative Research Centre. He is got extensive experience in health services research and implementation science, with a special interest in how technology can enhance the quality of care in Australia and globally. We'll then be hearing from Melanie, who's a senior lecturer with experience in technology in healthcare and a special interest in how technology can be used to enhance communication between patients and health professionals. And finally, we'll be hearing from Michelle Blows, who is a PR and media advisor for the Faculty of Health Sciences, who will be sharing her experience on how you interact with the media and how you promote your research to the general public and the press. So without further ado, Tim Shaw will be talking to you all.
Thanks very much, Anna, and a pleasure to be here. So Jack, just checking if there's no messages saying people can't hear us. Okay. I always want to check when you've got more people online. So thanks. It's a pleasure to join you today. Obviously, a lot of people online, a smaller number face-to-face, which is good. So what I wanted to talk today, do we have a clicker? No. Okay, what I wanted to talk today, I guess, is just some of my own personal experience about building networks and research profiles. I'd like to say right from the beginning, and this is my own particular view of the world, and I haven't had necessarily a traditional academic pathway. I've tended to come through consulting research, running my own R&D group in the university over the last 20 years now. So it's certainly my own reflection, but I think increasingly I hope some of what I might teach, what I might be able to share with you is relevant to all different pathways, and particularly I think because it's no longer, I think, possible to be an academic really just solely focused on getting your NHMRC grant and moving through those traditional pathways. I think most academics now need a bit of a mixed portfolio. I guess what I wanted to start with, particularly for the earlier career researchers, this is something that took me a long time to really appreciate, is the different kinds of groups that come together in a team these days, in a research team. And I think, again, it's increasingly hard to be a solo researcher. I think you really need to be part of a team. And something I learned was that there's different people that bring different skills to a research team. So some people are much deeper in perhaps their content matter expertise. Other people are particularly good at writing, or they're really good methodologists. Other people like me are, openly admitted more kind of into the networking, facilitating. That's something I'm just naturally enjoy doing, whereas other people obviously potentially from an industry practitioner side. And I think it's good to understand that, understand where your strengths are, but then understand that you need to be able to be familiar with all these areas. And what I've actually found is it's really good to make friends. So if you're a networker, make friends with people that are really good mythologists and writers, because I didn't realize there were people that actually really enjoy writing. It's not something I like doing. So find somebody that is, if that's not your strength, and then join together as a team. And obviously when you're early on, we all wear multiple hats. I mean, obviously I have to write, and you have to do all these bits, but I think you have to be familiar with them. So I guess the caveat for my talk is that I definitely live down the applied kind of T2, T3, T4 end, the kind of applied end of research in the categories of funding. Most of my money has come from Cat 2-4, so this is this is competitive but often commissioned research, and we've tended to live in the space of self-funding. This, I guess, has pushed me into more priority or commissioned research. So I've tended to have to be very aware of what our funders want rather than what I want to do. So just in terms of, these are some of my tips, I guess, in terms of what I found be successful. I mean, I think one of the key things is you've really got to create this opportunity to be open to opportunity. People often say I'm kind of hungry. Maybe because I had to self-fund my group for 15 years, so you have to be hungry. But I think you have to be kind of hungry for opportunity. You've got to keep looking. You never know when that next opportunity is going to arise. And I think often it's not just through the traditional grant process. So I've been very aware of the connections that I make and being open to those connections, that where you can get that next research program and build your profile in that space. So I often joke that I feel like I've got a bruised foot from sticking in lots of doorways and being fairly unabashed about that. I guess just with some examples in terms of some of my success over the years, my first big break came when I was doing a lot of digital imaging in my PhD, and I actually digitized the Wilson Museum of Anatomy when I was doing that. And a surgeon saw it and said, hey, can you do that for basic surgical training in '99? And I negotiated about a $1.5 million contract at that point with the university to develop that program up. So it was really just a happenstance thing, but I really went after it and followed that through. And that really kicked my career off. I spent a year at Harvard Medical School, which has been extremely useful to me. In fact, what happened there was my wife actually won a fellowship to Harvard. So I wrote to all the leads of Harvard Medical School departments and said, hey, I'm coming out. Can I work with you? And I ended up spending a year with the Department of Continuing Medical Education there, which is fantastic. It's been a huge break for me. So again, it's that taking the opportunity. Most recently with the Digital Health CRC, I mean, I'm now Director of Research with that, but at the time it was unclear who was leading that at the university. So I said, look, I'll step up and do that. And then you just got to kind of follow through with that. So I think, again, it's creating those opportunities and positioning yourself so that your profile can build and you can get more opportunities. I think the other key thing, again, is something I do a lot of, is the kind of networking piece. And I wouldn't underestimate this. So you give talks where you can. This is actually a photo of Candice in the room here doing a presentation. I always really encourage people to do talks and don't make them boring. It's just a fundamental failure. If you do anything else, go and do some programs of work about how to make a talk interesting. Very rarely do people really want to hear the detail of what you're talking about. Maybe in a conference when you're in a small group where you're really with people that are expert in your area, but 9 out of 10 times people want to be entertained, they want to understand what you're doing, but get a small amount of information. So really get across how to give a talk properly. I think that's fundamental. Take opportunities to be part of working groups. This is actually one of our working parties at UTS around the Digital Health CRC. And we had a number of young academics that have volunteered to be part of that. They're in the bottom floor of a $100 million grant. They'll almost certainly get something out of this, and they'll certainly get a profile out of this. Don't ignore the social. Again, not everybody wants to go to the parties and things like that, but it's really important. Often people say, no, I'm not going to go to the dinner. It's like, why aren't you going to the dinner? And that's where everybody is. It's at the dinner where you talk to everybody, and go and sit at the table with somebody you like or you admire, or you want to be part of. So there's nothing like sitting and sharing a dinner with somebody to meet with them in a different context. This is actually the COSA conference that I've got there, and I have a certain reputation maintained. That's me with the cow horns on, but we all dance every year at COSA, and it's a thing that we all do. And there's a lovely community at COSA, and a lot of your profile kind of builds through that. So again, not everybody's going to want to do that, but at least go to the dinner and meet people. So I think another key point is volunteering when you're early in your career. I think, you know, there's lots of opportunities beyond on internal. I think they're important, but external committees are really important too, because that's probably where your profile is going to grow. As I mentioned before, you know, if there's opportunities beyond working parties, do it. There's often opportunities for special interest groups, kind of communities of practice. So, you know, like we've got this digital health informatics network at the moment. Anna's running some communities of practice in that. You know, those kind of things help build your profile. Ironically, this is probably an area I haven't done enough on, and I don't know if Mel or anybody else is going to talk about this. I hope so. I mean, clearly social media is really important. I need to get onto this, and I maybe need to speak to Mel. So you've obviously got to be active in your social media profiles. I really want to set my own blog up. It's just a time issue for me. But I think obviously social media is increasingly important. There's plenty of people that can help you with that. Look, I think another key thing for my career that's built my profile is strategic mentorship. I think this is really important to find people that you want to work with, that you like, that can mentor you. So my first mentor was Bruce Barraclough, who I've known for the last 20 years now. In fact, he was the president that took a gamble on a totally unknown person to give me $1 million to build basic surgical training online. He was the president of the College of Surgeons at that time. And then he's gone on to be the chair of the Australian Safety and Quality Commission. He's with chair of Cancer Australia. And then he also connected me with many people in the US when I was in the US. So people like Bruce are really good networkers. So, you know, if you can find those kind of people, latch onto them and work with them and it's fun. They can become a personal friend. So I've been to Bruce's farm down south, and we kind of know each other through families and so on now. But I think that's really important. In the funding space that I work in, because we're largely in the kind of Cat 2 to 4, you've really got to know your funders. It's funny with academia, people, I mean, it's a business. You know, NH and MRC isn't so much, even though then, you know, you kind of need to know the system. But if you're going for Cat 2 to 4 funding, often the funder needs to know you. It's a trust thing. And you've got to understand them. So often I meet academics that have no understanding of what your funder actually wants or who they are. So you've really got to make that commitment. These are just some of the groups we work with. And you know, it kind of helps to know the family of the people you're working with and things like that. Not in a cynical sense, but it's just business. Anybody that's worked in business, that's how business operates. And I think that's what you need to understand. So whilst there is this, obviously we have this conflict between academic independence and funding, but there's no doubt that it helps if you know your funders, and particularly in the commissioned space. I'm not saying in any way you've been appropriate with that, but it just helps. I mean, ultimately though, you've got to do a good job. So even if you know the funder, somewhere in there, you know, when you get your first few commissioned research contracts, you still got to deliver, and it's about trust. And I think this is another thing academics often struggle with a little bit. That they work on academic timelines, where they're often a contract research group will be operating on their timeline. So you've got to kind of work through that and understand that. Again, really work in partnership with the funding organisation. I guess a last couple of slides. I know I'm running out of my 10 minutes. Because I'm working in commissioned research a lot of the time, I think you've also got to ride what's topical. You might have something that really interests you, but you know, I think you need to couch it sometimes in what other people find interesting. So I moved into online learning when it was just coming out in the 90s, then implementation science in the early 2000s when it was kind of all the rage. Still is, and then integrated care obviously became substantial, and then flowing onto digital health. And I've had a thread through that career, but I've always tried to move with the times a little bit. So I think that often helps you in an academic sense as you're moving forward, and build your profile in those areas. Because if you're going after money, you're better off being in the space where people are funding rather than not funding. It's just a reality. Okay, I think I've just got one or two more slides. So I think another one I think is when you get into being an early career researcher yourself, I think you can do a lot with the co-supervisors you work with. So I found it really important when you're setting a panel up to have yourself potentially as the primary. I think it's really important to have an early mid-career researcher on the PhD panel with you. They often do a lot of the hard yards as well, really help the student. Then obviously you need some content matter experts, but then often I think it helps to have a high profile kind of anchor supervisor on your panel as well, which really helps to build your profile as well. So for instance, I've got David Currow, who's head of the Cancer Institute, the co-supervisor on one of my PhD students, Emily Stone's program. He has fabulous input, but having that kind of weight behind you on the panel is really important, and it opens up doorways and things like that. So again, I think that helps build your profile. I guess the other thing, final point, is I found, the world's really small and Australia is tiny. You can guarantee that somebody you're working with today, it doesn't matter how many years, it might be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. If you fall out with them today, you'll walk into a room somewhere where they'll be making a decision on something you're doing. So just be very careful about how you build your relationships, particularly how you unbuild a relationship if you have a bad one, because you're bound to keep cycling back through it. I think for early career researchers, you just be really careful of your reputation and understand that everybody will suddenly start to cycle back into your world as you move through. So I always find it good to maintain relationships. Be very careful with those relationships as you move forward. Thanks, Emma.
Okay, thank you so much, Tim. Next up, we have Melanie Keep talking to us about social media and research profile raising. Also, I forgot to add at the start, we're going to do questions at the end. So if you're online, just send your questions through to Jack and we will answer them at the end. Thanks, Mel.
Hello, everyone. I'm putting a warning to the organisers. Can you have the xylophone ready for timing? And Jack, there's a bit of audience participation in my section too, also for the people in the room. So, hello, I'm Mel. I'm from the Faculty of Health Sciences. Part of my research is around looking at the impact of social media on our well-being, and I've done a few talks also around online professionalism. So part of what I'll be sharing with you today are my own personal experiences through trial and error, but also some of the research and literature in the online profile space. So audience participation. So for people on Zoom, I think you can add comments by taking your mouse and hovering to the top of the screen, and then you'll see a pop-up and there's a Q&A panel that you can click on to respond to the question. People in the room, you can just yell it out. So the question is, who is your online audience? Who are the people who are going to see what you put up about yourself on the internet? So people on Zoom. Anything that you put online about yourself because the internet doesn't cordon itself off.
From my perspective, when I'm using social media, I always assume I'm talking to other researchers, which
Right.
I don't know if it's good or bad.
So we have other researchers as one of our audience members. Fellow professionals, otherwise socially, family or friends, families of children with disabilities. Plus, come on. Anyone. Yeah, anyone who's using social media. Yes. So you're talking to potential employers, past employers, you're talking to your students if you're a teacher, you're talking to patients if you're a health professional, industry professionals, potentially publishers and funders. And these people work in different spaces. So there are places on the internet where you're more likely to get a particular audience. But when you're thinking about what you're putting online, just think about the person you don't want to see it, and then use that as your guide for what to put up. So, slide deck. So I'm going to share with you 3 examples of different networks. So LinkedIn is the one that I often hear people within universities say, oh, academics aren't really on it. But LinkedIn is where my next employer will look when I put in my job application. And it will also be where I might find my next employer. So LinkedIn, if you've got a profile and you are active enough on it, I do about the equivalent of 20 minutes, half an hour a month worth of work on LinkedIn, and that varies from month to month as well. But they will send me a list of jobs that I would be eligible for. And some days when I'm feeling a bit tired of academia and I'm having a bit of a low day, it makes me feel great. Not usually, that's only, for half a second a year. But it makes me feel good to know that there are other things out there. But that's my professional CV. People on there are my corporate, and that's where I formed a lot of my corporate relationships. So I've been invited to speak on panels in organisations such as the CBA, and that's where they're hanging out. So I need to be there too. I'm now a member of a board on a charity, and that's where they're hanging out. So that's where I've got to be as well. So that's a particular type of audience. My research colleagues are on a platform that I use called ResearchGate. So it's Facebook, but for researchers. We share what we've published, our conference presentations, and we network with each other. All of my international collaborations have come from ResearchGate. So there have been people whose universities don't have the same number of subscriptions to journals that we do, who might write in saying, can I get a copy of your article? And the default is just to send it to them, but I will also add a note to say, thanks for your interest in our paper. Are you doing some research in this area? Or I check out their site and say, I noticed that you've just published recently in this space. That was a really interesting paper, and start a conversation with people. And because of that, so somebody was asking for a paper that I'd published in the last year of my PhD, and they are from the UK, and they've been a referee on my promotions application, and they've started a number of collaborations, and we're looking at some international funding over the next 12 months as well. And that all came from yes, of course, have a copy of my paper, and what are you doing in this space? So it's not labour intensive, and other people are busy too. So a couple of sentences that show interest beyond the transactional nature of the conversation is really helpful. And ResearchGate is my research CV. So again, at most half an hour a month, but when I have a new paper that goes on there, or usually one of my collaborators is much faster and they'll add it, and you just have to say, yes, that was me. So that's ResearchGate. Twitter gets a lot of attention in this university in particular, but also amongst academics. So I won't dwell too much on that, but that's where I engage with particular communities of researchers where I want to have a conversation about something more than my paper. Or so, for instance, my work on Instagram. Instagram, as you might know, have recently taken out the ability for users to view other people's likes. So, for instance, if Tim got 5 million likes on a post, I would not know. I would just see Tim's post. And we haven't done any research on that, but it's a chance for me to make a comment on this and position myself as somebody who does work in this area. And it's a handy place for media to be able to identify you and pick you up as well. So these are the platforms that I use and invest some time in regularly as a professional. What are my tips for posting? So my first tip is people will check, as you probably do, their social media while they're commuting. So post before the commute or around about the time of commute. That's posts during those times seem to get more engagement over and above the other Facebook and Instagram and Twitter algorithms. So position your posts so they're around commute times. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays are the best times for posting. Thursday, Friday and weekends don't get much engagement. If you are posting on Thursday, Friday because something's just come hot off the press, I would recommend doing that in the morning or tagging in some key people who will build up the profile of that post. Thursdays and Fridays because people are out and doing other things, so they're not doing work things. Research has also shown that posts with images are more likely to get engagement, and particularly images with faces. I know sometimes that, selfies are a little bit, people are a bit on the fence about that, but images with faces do get engagement. And if you can't get an image with the face in it, or it's not appropriate, then images in general boost your engagement on posts. The next one was to have a conversation. I think oftentimes people think about social media as putting things out there, but people will respond to you if you respond to them. So at conferences, for instance, conferences now generally have a hashtag, so people tweet using the hashtag. So if you're there summarizing every talk, people know you're there, but you're not really building your network, you're building a profile. So maybe for one talk, don't post, but go in and like somebody else's post or ask a question to somebody else's presentation. Engage with the conversation, because if everybody just pushes their own content, you're kind of not getting that network component to what these social media outlets offer. So have conversations online. And I like this one because we all vary in how much milk we like to have with our tea. And some people shockingly have no milk with their tea, which I don't understand at all. But put enough out there that you're comfortable with. So at the start, you might not want to put out a lot, or you might read the room and go, oh, actually, people don't want to respond to this many tweets. So I'll tell a story of, I went to a conference last year and I thought, no, I'm going to engage online. This is an internet psychology, cyber psychology conference. So I'm just going to tweet a summary of every talk. So it's something for me, but it was also something for the community who couldn't be there. And then I found that people stopped tweeting because I was there summarizing everything already. So there was no online community. There was just Mel. And I thought, well, this defeats the purpose of being here. Why am I doing this? I may as well just write my notes. So I stopped. There was a session where I stopped, and then there was a lot of activity. And so part of engaging online is also reading your audience, the way that you would face-to-face. So if people aren't tweeting or they aren't responding, hold back a little bit and give them time to do something. So it might be that I thought I was doing something for the community, but the community was like, oh, she's a bit pushy. We'll just let her do her thing and we'll do something separately. So read your room and share according to that gauge. I know that's not a really, concrete thing, but see how other people are responding. And it might be better to not push, but instead engage in a conversation with others about what they're writing. My next tip is to shamelessly plug. I know I am an introvert by nature, which some people find difficult to believe, but part of this is just getting yourself out there. I don't like talking about myself, but I found it helpful to think about Dr. Mel as being somebody different from me. The Dr. Mel who submits a promotions application or a grant application, she's amazing. Me, I would much prefer to spend my time not at the party, but in my pajamas in front of the TV, watching something that Dr. Mel would frown upon. So what you're building is this public profile, and at some point you've got to be comfortable with that idea that this is the person that the world needs to see, your potential employer needs to see, your potential funder needs to see, and shamelessly plug. So my Twitter handle is usually on all of my presentation slides. It is on the signature in my email address. So I put the @DrMelKeep I put the handle in and I hyperlink that to my Twitter profile page. And then just the fact that you're on there, it doesn't take much. The equivalent of half an hour a month, you don't even have to do that in one block, means that you stay active, people know that you're still there, and then they'll remember you because they'll think, oh, I need somebody for that. Oh, I just read a thing by her. Let's go talk to Mel. Maybe I went faster than I thought. I haven't heard any dings yet. So this is my last slide. Share what you're comfortable with. So at the start, you might not feel brave enough to have your actual face, so it's much easier to be a superhero in a costume. And just start small. So start with what you're comfortable with, share what you feel is appropriate. I didn't share any personal things or any of my personal interests on Twitter until I started feeling a bit braver about my community and how well that might be received. And things like I am a big fan of football with a round ball. I love Harry Potter, so I recently posted a picture of me going in costume as a Hogwarts student. But share what you're comfortable with and do it bit by bit. And then eventually, years down the track, somebody will ask you to come and do a talk about how to build your online social media profile. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mel. That was great, and no xylophone needed to cut you off. So if Tim, Mel and Michelle could join me up here, we just have some time for questions. I believe we have a few from online, so we'll just go to those first from Jack.
Look, I think in those situations, I think just find somebody, often speak to somebody after a presentation. So if you've liked somebody's presentation, go and talk to them at the end of the presentation. And most people feel comfortable with that, ask them a question. I think another thing to do that I do at conferences is actually ask questions. There's nothing like getting a profile, but actually at the conference, not be the pain in the ass that asks questions constantly, but ask some sensible questions to at least a number of conferences. So I would suggest speak to people after they've done a presentation. I think the dinners are really, even for somebody, unless you're really introverted, and the opportunity to, I find it difficult to go and cold call somebody at drinks, particularly if they're senior. But I think you'll often find there's people that you just can naturally kind of coalesce with at the drinks and meet with them, but then sit down to people at dinner, I think is an easy way. Because then it's one-on-one and it's less threatening, and then you can have a conversation. So I think those kind of things, and I'm not in a bad way, but target people potentially the dinner that you think you'd like to sit next to and have interest with, whether it's a group or something like that. So I think there's those less threatening ways. You don't have to kind of go up to somebody you've never met, but find those ways to make that first connection.
Can I just add, so opportunistically, a lot of conferences have morning tea, afternoon tea, lunch in a buffet style. Yeah. So I will always say something to the person who's ahead of me or behind me in the queue, whoever looks friendliest and is not engaged with their own clique, like, oh, this looks really good. Yeah. And then you start a conversation, oh, so what are you doing here? Are you presenting? And I found that really helpful as well.
And go with a friend, the other thing. So, but don't sit at the table just with all your friends, because then that's fine. You might have a nice evening, but you haven't made any network. So, but if there's a couple of you, go and sit on a table with some other people. That sometimes makes it easier. Then you can talk with other people. But I always find it frustrating when your team of 8 goes and sits at a table of 8. It doesn't really achieve. I mean, it's like I said, it's fun, but not achieving anything for you. Yeah, go, Candice. Just speak up.
Yeah, so I usually find at conferences people that are at the we'll put tables at a dinner, so they're already talking. Yeah. Friends and whatnot. I just feel like a bit intrusive.
Yeah, so Candice is saying, she probably can't hear online, Candice is saying that often senior people are already sitting at tables and are often, and it's hard to get up to them. But look, I've just found, just go and be friendly. I know it sounds silly, but you can always catch them. I mean, if you stand next to them long enough, unless it's really embarrassing. And the other thing is, I think you can tell whether somebody's conversation is casual or they're talking about the next grant they're putting in. If you're standing next to somebody and they don't give you any eye contact and they're really intense, then back away. But if they're not, then often they'll turn to you and chat with you. But I think, again, ask them about their research or something that they're interested in. Everybody likes to be asked about what they're doing. So obviously some conferences have fully formal dinner table setups. That's hard to get into. But you can still put your name on the table next to people if you're on your own with somebody you think of interest.
So my LinkedIn profile doesn't contain a list of my publications. I might write, so LinkedIn has the set profile where it's sort of employment history, volunteering history, committees that you're on, other organisations that you follow. And then every now and then, if I've got a publication that I think would be of interest to a wider audience than academics, I would post about that on LinkedIn. But my profile is actually, it looks a lot like a CV. It's been employed at Sydney University as a senior lecturer from this year to this year, and then these are the tasks that I do, or a bit of a summary of what I do. Whereas ResearchGate is more like my academic CV, which lists all of my conference presentations and all of my publications on there. So does that make sense? I think that the nature of the platform forces me to put different content.
I'm just concerned that people aren't hearing your questioning.
That's okay.
So I think you maybe need to stand up here and ask the questions. Oh, they are hearing them, are they? Okay. Okay. Okay, great. Did Martin have some? No.
Yes, I just want to make a comment too about the conference. If you're an HDR student, name your supervisor should be the person that introduces you to the people that are going to be important for your. These might be people who could be your examiners. You know, they take an interest in your research, And I think it's really important for us going to the conference with. Also heard of a supervisor that said, I'll fund you to go to this conference. You take the responsibility of meeting 5 new people every day. And I think that's also a good strategy to set yourself as a task to go and meet new people.
I think that's a great point. So I don't know if everybody heard that. So this is Martin Mackey was commenting, I think, effective, very, that it really is a role of a supervisor to actually introduce younger academics so they don't have to do cold calling always themselves. And I like the idea that maybe if you fund somebody, they have to come back and say who are the 5 people they've met. That certainly encourages you to do that. Again, that mentor comes in. So if your mentor's in the conference, that should be something that they can do as well.
And then follow them on social media so they remember who you are.
Yeah.
There's another question for Mel. Is there a reason why you would choose ResearchGate instead of Google Scholar for your publication?
So Google Scholar kind of indexes you automatically, as far as I know. But my community is on ResearchGate. So I think that's the more honest answer. I haven't invested time in finding out much about Google Scholar. And ResearchGate allows you to also ask questions of each other. So recently I was looking for a scale looking at stigma. So you can put that as a question in ResearchGate and people will respond to that because they're following what you're doing. And I found that that's where my people are.
So does anyone in the room have any questions they would like to ask or any comments they'd like to share?
The other key piece is with presentations, because you've got to make your presentation interesting. Like I was talking about, then somebody will remember your presentation, more likely to talk to you when you're at a conference or wherever it might be. And there's lots of courses to do that. I'm actually posters are another thing. So Anna, who's been presenting, is actually a master of doing an interesting poster. Because often as an early career researcher, you'll just be given a poster, and I've seen so many people cram tons in. Where Anna did these, there was one conference where she did this thing that had a whole pile of helicopters on it. It was around chemotherapy, and the helicopters were carrying the drugs, and it had hardly any words on it. And I hadn't seen it before I went to the conference, and I opened it up and thought, oh my God, what has Anna done? And I put it up as well, I'll stand by it, but it was by far the most popular poster at the conference and won the poster award. And lots of people came to it just because it was visually alluring and grabbed people. So it was really interesting. So I think that don't underestimate the power of presentation and visualizations and those things. So gain those skills as you go through.
I could ask Mel a question about being on social media. Is there a risk of being trolled on social media, and how do we respond and write things in a very respectful way that won't attract trolling? So, for example, if you disagreed very much with another piece of work, or how do you manage to do that on social media respectfully without, getting into some sort of problems?
I don't say anything that I wouldn't say to somebody in person, and in some ways, I think our science training is very helpful for not overstating claims. And so the worst I've seen, wait, this is being recorded, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the worst I've seen is two research groups with different approaches to science and stating or overstating claims. And after some public by academic standards exchanges on Twitter, they just stop following each other. I haven't had any negative experiences on social media, people being quite respectful, but I think part of that is also I choose not to say anything that my science won't back up. So if there's a correlation, I'll say that there's a relationship, but I won't say that there's causal. And I tend not to, contrary to what I'm doing now, so give advice, because people will make their own minds. They're adults, and you don't win people over by arguing and being belligerent. So I stick to what I'm comfortable saying to people face to face, even if I disagree with them, and I stick to the science. So if there's no evidence to say there's a causal relationship, there's no evidence to say. However clickbaity that might sound.
One as well. Someone's asked, if I identify someone I want to be a mentor, how do I approach them and talk to them about this?
So look, there's formal mentoring programs you can go through, and some of them are very good. So my wife's actually a senior executive, and she's a very active mentor, and she does that through a number of channels. So there's formal channels you can go through. There's different societies that set up mentoring. I think just be honest and talk to the person if you want them to be your mentor. Often I think it helps to have a bit of a relationship first. Like, don't go up and say, "I've never met you, but I want you to be my mentor." It's a bit hard. I mean, I now mentor people. I still don't think I'm old enough, but I guess I am. So, I mean, but I think having a bit of a relationship first really helps, and let that grow. And I mean, I don't think with Bruce I ever asked him to be my mentor. It's just kind of happened. And so I think getting to know the person beyond work questions helps with that. So I think just exploring that relationship. I mean, there is a lot of debate about people that need mentoring and perhaps people that don't get it, and all of that side of it. So I think if you identify somebody, then just kind of approach them. If they're too busy, then they're not going to be able to do that. But just get to know them a little better, then talk to them about that. But then I do think, particularly for women at the moment, there are lots of opportunities for mentoring. And the university is really putting those kind of processes in place. So look at that. And often you actually find you suddenly with somebody that's quite a senior person that can maybe not be the person that mentors you, but puts you in touch with other people that might. So go after the channels that are there, and then also approach people.
Yeah, I was at an education conference recently, and the keynote was talking about mentors for the moment. So there are different stages of your career and different aspects of your career, even within the one stage where different people would be most helpful.
Yeah.
So people often come, especially recently with some of the education grants, people come to me with, "Oh, Mel, can do you have some time? I'm thinking of putting something in. I know you've been successful in the past. Can we have a chat?" So that at least gives me something concrete to work with. And it's nice when they don't ask too much up front. So I can commit to a half-hour coffee chat to share through ideas. And then if we've got a rapport, there will then be an offer of, if you want, I can have a look at a draft if you'd like. And there's not really a formal label of mentor-mentee, but in that moment, I'm somebody that can be helpful to that person. But I'm probably not the same person that would go to where they think, should I stay in academia or should I pursue a job at the ABC being their science writer? That would be a different mentor of the moment. So I think identifying your moments and who would be appropriate and starting with a small ask would be where I would go.
It's very wise counsel. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions from the room? Online? Awesome. Great. Well,
wrap up.
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you to all of our presenters for making time to come today, and for everyone that came online and in person. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned at the start, this network for HDIs is a collaboration between the Digital Health Informatics Network and the Faculty of Health Sciences. Behind me are some links to the DHN website, which I strongly encourage you to join if you're interested in all aspects of digital health. It's a great community with, I think we have about 500, 600 members, and there's always exciting events on. If you are a HDR student at the University of Sydney in the digital health area or are interested in digital health research, please join our Facebook group so we can communicate with you and get in touch with you. Most importantly, I just want to do a big thank you to the team that helped me organise this event. I've already mentioned Jack, who is in the room with me, but I also had help from Andrew Campbell, who got a bit of a cameo in Michelle's talk, and also Brad Ridout, who helped with the ideas around this event. So thank you all for joining me. For those of you in the room, just a reminder that there is snacks for you to enjoy. So please help yourself to snacks and drinks. And for everyone online, thank you so much for tuning in.